The knife slipped from Alexander's trembling fingers, clattering against the porcelain sink like a gunshot in the quiet dawn. Blood, his own, hot and accusing, smeared the faucet, a crimson reminder of the lie he'd carved into his skin years ago, now reopening like a grave. God forgives everything but this, the voice echoed in his head, not his father's, but the pastor's, the one man who'd sworn to save him, only to damn him deeper. Alexander stared at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror of their cramped Capitol Hill apartment, the face of a man who'd built a life on borrowed grace staring back. 30 seconds, that's all it took for the proposal to unravel last night. Ethan, his anchor, his everything, had said yes under the relentless Seattle drizzle, their lips sealing the promise amid cheers from oblivious friends. But then the text came, "We need to talk. Now." Pastor Hale. And with it, the ghost Alexander had buried in the red dirt of rural Idaho clawed its way free. He wrapped his wrist in a hasty bandage, the gauze soaking through almost immediately, and stumbled into the living room where Ethan slept on the couch, oblivious, his broad chest rising and falling like the tide Alexander wished he could drown in. They were 6 weeks from the wedding, a small affair at a progressive chapel downtown, rainbow flags fluttering like defiant prayers. Alexander had scripted it all. The vows he'd whisper about second chances, the cake with blue fondant waves echoing Lake Coeur d'Alene's cruel beauty. But secrets have a way of surfacing, like oil in holy water, and Pastor Hale had seen it coming from a mile away. The drive to the old man's rectory in Wallingford felt like a funeral procession. Rain lashed the windshield of Alexander's beat-up Subaru, blurring the hipster cafes and tattoo parlors that screamed "You're safe here" in this liberal bubble of the Pacific Northwest. Alexander gripped the wheel until his knuckles whitened, the bandage itching like a noose. He'd fled Boise 10 years ago, at 18, after the night that broke him. The bonfire party where he'd kissed Tommy Reynolds under a harvest moon, only for the town to brand him a sinner. His father, the stern deacon, had locked him in the basement with nothing but a Bible and a belt. But it was Pastor Hale, then young, idealistic, who'd pulled him out, whispering promises of redemption in the confessional's dim light. Redemption. The word tasted like ash now. Hale had mentored him through community college, helped him land that first job at the Seattle Times as a copy editor, even introduced him to the progressive congregation where Alexander now volunteered, teaching queer youth about self-love wrapped in scripture. It was Hale who'd officiate the wedding, his blessing the final erasure of the boy who'd once prayed to be straight. Or so Alexander thought. The rectory loomed like a Victorian sentinel, ivy choking its brick facade. Hale waited on the porch, his clerical collar stark against the gray flannel shirt, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand. His face, lined with 70 winters, twisted into something between paternal concern and quiet fury. "Alex," he said, voice gravelly from years of sermons, "come in before you catch your death." Inside, the air smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, comforting once, suffocating now. They settled in the study, Hale's domain of leather-bound tomes and a cross that dwarfed the room. Alexander's heart hammered as the pastor slid a manila envelope across the oak desk. "This arrived yesterday. From Boise." "Your mother." Alexander's breath hitched. He hadn't spoken to her since the day he left, the day she chose silence over son. His fingers, still tacky from the sink's residue, tore open the flap. Inside, a stack of yellowed letters, brittle as autumn leaves, tied with a faded ribbon. and atop them, a single photograph, Polaroid grainy, edges curled like claws. It was him. 15. Gangly in a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big, arms wrapped around Tommy on the banks of the lake. Their lips met in a stolen kiss, innocent and electric, the water behind them shimmering like fool's gold. But scrawled on the back in his mother's looping script, the boy who led him to hell. Burn this, or God help us all. I hid that, Alexander whispered, the words scraping his throat raw. Burned it. How? Hale leaned forward, eyes like polished obsidian. She kept it. Said it was evidence of your struggle. And now, with the wedding announcements in the paper, old ghosts are stirring. Tommy's family wrote too. They know. About you. About us. The pause hung heavy, laced with implication. Alexander's world tilted. Us? No. Hale had been his savior, nothing more. The late-night talks, the hand on his shoulder lingering too long, those were comfort, not sin. But the pastor's gaze bored into him, seeing not the man ready to vow forever to Ethan, but the boy he'd molded in secret shadows. You think this changes anything? Alexander forced out, voice cracking. I'm not that kid anymore. Ethan's my future. Hale's laugh was a dry rattle. Futures are built on foundations, Alex. And yours is cracked wide open. If this gets out, if the congregation, your father, sees what you hid, it won't just be scandal. It'll be ruin. For you. For that chapel. For the work we've done. The we sliced deeper than any blade. Alexander stood, chair scraping like bones on gravel. What do you want, then? To call it off? To make me straight again? Hale rose too, slower, his height unfolding like Judgment Day. I want you to remember who pulled you from the pit. And if you push forward, I'll have to tell Ethan the truth. Not just the photo. The rest. The rest. The words uncoiled in Alexander's gut. The confessions Hale had twisted into something darker. The lessons in absolution that left him hollow. It wasn't love, it was control, cloaked in grace. And now, on the cusp of his own grace with Ethan, the pastor dangled it like a noose. Alexander fled into the rain, the envelope clutched to his chest, letters scattering like confetti from hell. Back home, Ethan stirred as he slammed the door, his green eyes bleary but warm. Babe, what's wrong? Nothing, Alexander lied, forcing a smile that tasted of rust. He pulled Ethan close, burying his face in the crook of his neck, inhaling the scent of cedar and safety. But as Ethan's arms wrapped around him, strong and sure, the photograph burned in his pocket, a secret no longer hidden, but weaponized. That night, sleep evaded him. Ethan snored softly beside him, dreams untroubled, while Alexander traced the scar on his wrist, the one from that basement night. He told Ethan a sanitized version, a rough youth, a family fight, but the full truth festered like an untreated wound. Tommy had been his first love, sweet and stolen, until the beating fists from so-called friends, ribs cracking under boots, Hale arriving too late to stop it, too early to question why a pastor's hand wandered in the aftermath. We'll get through this, Ethan murmured in the dark, sensing the tension. His fingers interlaced with Alexander's. A lifeline. Whatever it is, Alexander wanted to believe it. God, he did. But as dawn bled gray through the blinds, he slipped from bed, padding to the kitchen for whiskey, straight from the bottle, the burn a poor substitute for confession. The wedding loomed, invitations out, tuxes fitted. Yet Hale's threat echoed the rest. What if Ethan learned not just the photo, but the pastor's guidance? The touches blurred as healing, the silence bought with shame. By morning, resolve hardened. He'd confront Hale, burn the letters, bury the past. But as he dressed for work, his phone buzzed, a voicemail from an unknown Boise number. Alexander? It's Tommy. I'm coming to the wedding. We need to talk. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Tommy, alive, free, unscarred by the fists that had nearly ended him. And now, crashing into Alexander's fragile now like a storm off the Cascades. Weeks blurred into a fever dream of preparation laced with dread. Alexander threw himself into the details, the string quartet practicing Vivaldi in the chapel's nave, the florist arranging lilies that mocked purity. Ethan, ever the optimist, planned their honeymoon in the San Juans, cabins by the sea, no cell service, just them. A reset, he called it, kissing Alexander's temple during fittings, oblivious to the tremor in his fiancée's hands. But Hale was a specter, his sermons at Sunday service laced with veiled warnings. Sins of the father echo in the son, secrets devour the soul. The congregation nodded, rainbow pins glinting on lapels. But Alexander saw the fractures, whispers after coffee hour, eyes lingering too long. Then, the first crack, a letter from his mother, slipped under the apartment door like a serpent's tongue. Your father is dying. He wants forgiveness. But first, renounce this abomination. Enclosed, another photo, this one of Alexander at 16, kneeling in prayer, Hale's hand on his bowed head, the pose too intimate for father-son. He burned it in the sink, flames licking high, smoke curling like accusations. Ethan walked in mid-ritual, eyes wide. Alex, what the hell? It's nothing. Old baggage. Bullshit. Ethan's voice softened, hurt threading through. You've been ghosting me emotionally for weeks. If it's family, it's not. Alexander pulled him into a fierce kiss, desperate to drown the doubt. They made love on the kitchen floor, urgent and raw, Ethan's body a bulwark against the storm. Afterward, tangled in sheets, Ethan traced the bandage on his wrist. Promise me you'll let me in. I promise. The lie settled heavy, but in that moment, felt like truth. Tommy arrived 2 days before the rehearsal dinner, stepping off the Greyhound at the downtown terminal like an apparition from fevered dreams. Taller now, broader, with a beard that hid the boyish jaw Alexander remembered. But those eyes, stormy gray, unchanged, pinned him from across the crowd. Alex. The hug was brief, bone-crushing, laced with the scent of pine and regret. They met at a dive bar in Fremont, neon trolls guarding the door, the jukebox crooning Springsteen. Tommy nursed a beer, fingers drumming the label. I saw the announcement in the Boise paper. Figured. Congrats, man. But your mom, she's unraveling. Sent me that photo. Said if I didn't come warn you, she'd go public. Warn me about what? Alexander's voice was a whisper, drowned by the clink of glasses. Tommy leaned in, breath warm. Hale. He wasn't just your mentor. After you left, he came to me, said you confessed things. Sins. And he helped me too, the way he helped you. But it wasn't help, Alex. It was. The word hung unspoken. Abuse. Alexander's stomach roiled, the whiskey from last night surging bile. No. He saved us. Tommy's laugh was bitter. Saved? He prayed. And now, with your wedding, he's scared. Sent me a letter too, threatening to out me unless I sabotage it. The pieces slotted. Hale's envelope. The photo. The us. Not mentorship. A pattern. A predator in shepherd's clothing. Alexander's hands shook as he slammed cash on the bar. We end this. Together. But fate, that cruel American novelist, had other drafts. The rehearsal dinner that night was a glittering farce at a waterfront bistro, fairy lights strung like nooses over Puget Sound. Ethan shone, toasting their love with champagne flutes raised high, his speech weaving tales of stolen glances in lecture halls, midnight drives to Mount Rainier. The guests, queer elders from the church, Ethan's architect colleagues, Alexander's ragtag found family, laughed, teared up, clinked glasses. Hale arrived late, his entrance parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. He clasped Ethan's hand, murmuring blessings, but his eyes locked on Alexander's across the room, cold as January frost. Then, in a slight too smooth for sanctity, he pressed the envelope into Ethan's palm during a photo op. A gift for the groom, he said, voice oily. Memories to cherish. Ethan opened it later. In the men's room mirror's harsh glow, Alexander trailing behind like a condemned man. The letters spilled out, his mother's ravings, Tommy's contact info scribbled on a napkin Hale must have swiped. And the photo, that damned kiss, staring up like judgment. Who's this, Alex? Ethan's voice was steel wrapped in silk, hurt fracturing the edges. Alexander sank to his knees on the tile, the ring on his finger mocking him. Tommy. My first. Everything. It was a lifetime ago. And this, Ethan thrust the letters forward. Your mom calling it the devil's work? And Hale, why does he have this shit? The truth clawed up, unbidden. Because he used it. Used me. After Tommy, after the beating, Ethan, he made me believe I deserved it. Touched me, called it absolution. I hid it because I was ashamed. Because I thought loving you meant leaving it behind. Ethan's face crumpled, not in anger, but devastation, a man watching his foundation quake. You promised. No secrets. I know. Alexander reached for him, but Ethan recoiled, the envelope crumpling in his fist. I need air. The door swung shut, leaving Alexander alone with echoes. The ferry to Bainbridge Island cut through the sound like a blade through silk, waves slapping the hull in rhythmic accusation. Alexander stood at the rail, wind whipping his coat, the city lights receding like dying stars. Ethan hadn't come home last night, texted only at a hotel. Need space. And now, with the wedding dawn breaking in peach hues, Alexander clutched his phone, willing it to vibrate with forgiveness. Tommy met him at the dock, thermos of black coffee in hand, his truck idling like a getaway car. Hale's at the chapel early. Setting up, he said. But I tailed him. Guy's got a duffel. Looks like he's bolting. Alexander nodded, numb. The plan was simple. Confront, record, expose. Tommy had wired his phone, a digital Judas ready to capture Hale's confession. They'd loop in the bishop anonymously after, let the denomination's gears grind the rod away. But as they drove the winding roads to the progressive chapel, a modernist glass and wood haven overlooking the water, doubt gnawed. What if Ethan walked away for good? What if the secret stain proved indelible? The chapel rose like a beacon, solar panels glinting, pride flags at half-mast in the breeze. Inside, the sanctuary hummed with pre-wedding bustle. Ushers arranging chairs, a violinist tuning in the alcove. Hale stood at the altar, adjusting the unity candle, his back to the door, a silhouette of betrayal. "Pastor," Alexander's voice echoed, stealing as Tommy flanked him, phone live in his pocket. Hale turned, feigning surprise, but his eyes darted guilty flicker. "Alex." "Tommy. This is unexpected. Rehearsals not till noon. Cut the shit." Tommy's drawl cut sharp, Idaho roots unpolished. "We know about the letters. The threats. The help you peddled." Hale's composure cracked, just a hair, lips thinning, hands clasping behind his back. "Boys, let's not air laundry in God's house." Alexander stepped forward, the scar on his wrist throbbing like a heartbeat. "You used that house to bury us. Me, after the lake. Tommy, when he broke. You called it grace, but it was grooming. And now, because I'm happy, we're happy, you drag up ghosts to sabotage it." The pastor's gaze hardened, shifting to offense. "I saved you from yourselves. From the fire you courted. That photo is proof of your fall. And if Ethan sees the full measure, your confessions, the nights we prayed through your urges." "Urges," Tommy snarled, yanking out his phone, red light blinking. "Say it plain, old man. You molested us. Used scripture as a blindfold." Hale lunged, not for fists, but the phone snatching it, hurling it against the altar with a crack that splintered wood and silence. "Lies, you're the sinners, twisting salvation into scandal." The scuffle was brief, chaotic. Tommy tackling Hale, Alexander scrambling for the device, shards of screen glittering like broken vows. Ushers burst in, pulling them apart, but the damage bloomed, Hale's collar askew, face flushed, the truth hanging ragged in the air. By the time police arrived, called by a frantic florist, the recording was salvaged, partial but damning. Hale's denials laced with slips, prayers too intimate to parse as pure. They hauled him away in cuffs, his pleas of persecution echoing off the rafters. Alexander watched from the steps, chest heaving, as squad cars vanished down the hill. Catharsis, or just the first wave? Tommy clapped his shoulder. "You did it, man. Now go find your guy." But Ethan was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail through the ferry ride back. Texts unread. "Please. Let me explain." Panic clawed. Had Hale gotten to him first? Slipped another poison envelope during the night? Alexander raced to the hotel, a boutique spot in Belltown with harbor views mocking his turmoil. The clerk, stone-faced, confirmed. Check out at 8 a.m. No forwarding address. Desperation drove him to Ethan's office, the architecture firm a glass airy downtown. His assistant, Lena, a sharp-witted dyke with a nose for drama, eyed him pityingly. He called in sick. Said something about needing to think. Left this. The envelope, not Hale's, but Ethan's handwriting. Read this before you come after me. Inside, a single sheet, words stark as blueprints. Alex, I love you. But love isn't blind. I talked to Hale last night before you could stop me. He spun a tale, you as the victim, him as the hero. But the letters, they paint you as the seducer, the one who led Tommy astray, who clung to him in the dark. And your scars self-inflicted, he said, from guilt. I want to believe you, but doubt's a thief. Meet me at the lake house tonight. The one in Idaho. We finish this where it started. Or we don't. Idaho. 8 hours east, across the Cascades spine. Alexander didn't hesitate, gassed the Subaru, blasted mixtapes of the Nationals' brooding anthems, the highway unspooling like a confessional reel. Memories flooded. Boise's flat sprawl, the Basilica's bells tolling shame, his father's mill closing like a coffin lid. And the lake, Coeur d'Alene, blue as betrayal, where Tommy's kiss had ignited him, and Hale's rescue extinguished the flame. Twilight bled into the panhandle as he crested the pass, pines whispering conspiracies. The lake house wasn't theirs. Ethan's family owned a cabin there, a rustic retreat he'd mentioned once, off-season ghost town. Alexander arrived as stars pricked the ink-black sky, gravel crunching under tires. Smoke curled from the chimney. Ethan's Jeep hunkered like a sentinel. Inside, the air was thick with pine sap and unspoken verdicts. Ethan sat by the stone fireplace, flames dancing shadows across his face, jaw set, eyes red-rimmed. Bourbon bottle half empty on the mantel, glass in hand. You came. Ethan's voice was whiskey rough, neutral as a deposition. Always. Alexander shed his coat, the room closing in, log walls etched with vacation carvings, a Navajo rug muffling his steps. Hale's arrested. Confessed enough on tape. It was him, Ethan. All of it. Ethan's laugh was hollow, setting the glass down with deliberate care. I know. Cops called. Your buddy Tommy forwarded the file. But that's not the secret that guts me. Alexander froze, heart plummeting. What then? You. Ethan stood, closing the distance, but not touching, close enough to feel the heat, far enough for the chasm. Hale said you chose silence. For years. Let him preach from our pulpit, knowing what he did. Let me invite him into our life. Blind. I was scared. The admission cracked him open. Scared you'd see me as broken. As the kid who let it happen. Ethan's hand cupped his jaw, thumb brushing the scar. I see you now. And I still love you. But trust, that's the fracture. We vow in sickness, in health, but not in secrets. Tears welled, hot and unbidden. Alexander leaned into the touch, voice fracturing. Then teach me how to rebuild. The kiss was tentative, tasting of salt and surrender, lips meeting like puzzle pieces warped by fire. Ethan pulled back, searching his eyes. One condition. We go back. Face your folks. The town. Not running anymore. Alexander's nod was a vow unto itself. Dawn found them entwined on the rug. The lake outside a mirror to new mercies. Ripples, not riptides. But Boise wasn't done with him. The drive south was a pilgrimage. Ethan at the wheel, Alexander navigating ghosts. His father's house squatted on the outskirts, clapboard sagging under neglect, the mill's shadow long gone. Mary, his mother, answered the door, shawl-wrapped and hollow-cheeked, eyes widening at the pair on her stoop. Alexander, her whisper was wind through wheat. Inside, the deacon lay propped in a recliner, oxygen hissing like serpents, skin translucent as parchment. Dad, the word stuck, but Ethan's hand in his steadied the tremor. The prodigal's return unfolded in fits, accusations flung like communion wafers, Mary's sobs a dirge, the father's rasp admitting fragments. I failed you, boy. Thought faith could whip it straight. Hale's arrest hit the local news that afternoon. A thunderclap, pastor charged in abuse scandal, ripping through pews like shrapnel. Forgiveness came ragged, not in floods. Mary clutched the burned photo's ashes from a tin, murmuring, I kept it to remember the boy you were. His father extended a gnarled hand. Marry your man. I'll pray right this time. They left with no fanfare, the flatlands fading in the rear view, but lighter, secrets exhumed, graves filled. Back in Seattle, the chapel waited, flags at full mast. Vows exchanged under that glass roof. Rain pattering benediction. I choose you, scars and all. In the years that followed, Alexander wrote it down, not for absolution, but witness. Tommy founded a survivor group in Spokane. Ethan designed sanctuaries for the sidelined. And Hale? His trial was a quiet crucifixion. Truth the nails. Alexander testified, voice steady, the boy in the photo finally free. Love, turned out, wasn't erasure. It was excavation, digging through the dirt to find the light beneath. The gavel's echo still reverberated in Alexander's bones 2 years later, a seismic aftershock from the courtroom in Olympia where Hale's empire of whispers crumbled. Sentenced to 15 years, the pastor had met Alexander's gaze one last time, not with defiance, but defeat, lips mouthing sorry like a prayer too late. Alexander hadn't nodded, hadn't wept. He'd simply turned away, Ethan's arm a steady anchor, and stepped into the spring air where crocuses defied the damp chill. Life, in its stubborn American way, rebuilt. Their apartment traded up to a craftsman bungalow in Finney Ridge, creaky floors, a backyard for basil and brutal honesty. Ethan thrived, his firm landing commissions for queer community centers, blueprints blooming into safe harbors. Alexander quit the Times for freelance, penning essays on faith's fractures for outlets like The Atlantic, each dispatch a brick in his mending wall. Tommy visited often, his husband, a burly chef with a laugh like thunder, turning dinners into raucous therapy sessions. But secrets, even exhumed, leave echoes. Nights when thunder rolled off the Olympics, Alexander woke gasping, the basement's damp chill phantom on his skin. Ethan learned the ritual. Strong arms, murmured you're here, lovemaking that stitched wounds with sweat and sighs. We're architects of our own ruin and repair, Ethan would quip, tracing constellations on Alexander's back, turning terror to tenderness. The real test came unannounced. 6 months post-trial, a letter, postmarked Boise, no return address. Inside, a single page from his father's Bible, margins crammed with shaky script. DUT 30:3, God restores fortunes. Saw your piece in the paper. Proud, Son. D. Attached. A check modest, but enough for a down payment on land up north, near the San Juans. Ethan found him in the garden, knees muddied, letter trembling in dirt-caked hands. Road trip. Ethan's grin was lopsided, hopeful. The plot was raw 10 acres of second-growth firs, a creek gurgling silver promises. They broke ground that summer, hammers swinging in tandem, building a cabin not unlike Ethan's family retreat. Stone hearth, wide porch for stargazing. Neighbors trickled in, loggers turned homesteaders, a lesbian couple with goats, welcoming them with pie and prying questions dodged with dry humor. Just two guys chasing the American dream, minus the white picket, Alexander joked, but inside, roots took tentative hold. Idaho pulled once more that fall, a harvest moon summons. His father, remission flickering like a faulty bulb, wanted a visit. No sermons, Alexander stipulated over the phone, voice brooking no basilica. Just pie. The drive was a mosaic. Spokane's sprawl yielding to Palouse Hill's rolling gold, Ethan's playlist shuffling Dylan and Brandy Carlisle. Mary met them at the door, apron dusted flour, ice softer than memory. Inside, the deacon, frielier, but fire undimmed, gestured to chairs. No cross dominated, instead, a photo album splayed open, pages whispering youth. They talked haltingly at first, crops failing, church schisms, Hale's shadow lingering like fallout. Then, the pivot. That night, his father rasped, fingers knotted white on cane. In the basement. I thought I was saving you. But I broke what God made whole. Alexander's throat tightened, Ethan's knee pressing solidarity under the table. You did. But I'm mending. With help. He glanced at Ethan. Love a quiet thunder. Mary slid rhubarb pie across, steam curling grace. We saw the wedding online, your sister's post. Looked beautiful. It was glass chapel aglow, vows echoing off water. But the real sacrament unfolded later, on the porch swing creaking under starfire. His father, voice a wheeze, pressed a worn key into Alexander's palm. The old cabin. Yours now. Fix it up. Or burn it. The key was iron, heavy as atonement. They toured it next day. Musty shell by the lake, ghost thick as dust. Tommy joined, uninvited but inevitable, his crew hauling demo tools. Walls came down in cathartic crashes. The confessional corner where Hale's hands had wandered, reduced to splinters. The prayer nook, reborn as a library for queer theology. Ethan sketched Renos over campfires, loft bedroom with lakeview, kitchen for communal feasts. A haven, he called it, blueprints furled like scrolls. Alexander nodded, but saw more, a bridge across chasms. Winter hit hard that year, snow blanketing the panhandle like absolution. They holed up in the half-built space, sleeping bags on subfloor, bourbon by the blaze. One blizzard night, as wind howled hymns, Ethan turned serious. Kids. Ever think about it? Alexander stilled, fork midway to mouth, can stew their feast. Yeah. Surrogate, maybe. Or adoption. But the legacy. What if I pass on the fractures? Ethan's hand covered his. Or the strength. Look at you, survivor, writer, husband. That's the inheritance. The word husband landed soft, profound. They married legally that spring in Seattle, courthouse quickie before the Idaho rebuild kicked off. Vows renewed under courthouse fluorescence. I take your past as prologue, your future as home. The cabin rose phoenix-like by summer. Timber frame hugging curves, solar arrays nodding to progress. They hosted the first gathering, Tommy's crew, Boise stragglers, even his sister with her toddlers in tow. Laughter echoed off beams, grill smoke mingling with creek mist, rainbows arcing post-shower. But humanity's arc bends slow. Hale's appeal dragged through appeals court, headlines dredging old pains. Alexander testified again, voice amplified by scars turned scripture. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, he told the bench. Ethan in the gallery, steady gaze his compass. It's freeing the next boy from the basement. The ruling stuck. Hale's appeals crumbled like dry rot. Letters trickled in after, from survivors Hale had silenced, thanking Alexander's words for courage. One, a kid from Tacoma, drove up for coffee. Your essay? It named my monster. Ethan watched from the porch that day, pride etching his features. You're changing the map, babe. Alexander shrugged, but swelled. Evenings, they'd walk the lakeshore, Tommy's ghost companion now, not haunt, but harmony. Remember that kiss? Alexander murmured one dusk, water lapping gentle. Ethan smirked. The one that started it all? Yeah. Best plot twist. Laughter bubbled. Free. But plot twists persist. Fall brought Mary's call. Your father's gone. Quiet. Wanted you to have the Bible. The funeral was sparse. Family pew. Hymns hushed. Alexander read from Deuteronomy, voice steady. Restore our fortunes, O Lord. Afterward, in the cemetery's hush, he scattered ashes by the lake. Not his father's fully, but the basement's echo, mingling with silt. Back home, grief bloomed slow. Ethan's stews, friends' firesides, writing as exorcism. Winter solstice, they lit the cabin's hearth first time, flames dancing ancestors away. To fortunes restored, Ethan toasted, glasses clinking. Alexander pulled him close, lips brushing ear. And secrets shared, their first freeze deepened, but so did vows. Spring thawed revelations, a pregnancy test, positive, Saget's gift, a boy due July. Naming came easy, Micah, after the prophet of justice. Ultrasounds painted futures, tiny heartbeat, fists waving defiance. Alexander's hand on Ethan's, no, on the curve of proxy belly during visits anchored wonder. He'll know truth from day one, he whispered to the grainy screen. Labor hit under full moon, hospital lights blurring into memory. Micah emerged squalling, red-faced fury, 10 fingers claiming world. Alexander held him first, Ethan's tears salt on his shoulder. Our plot twist, he murmured, nuzzling downy head. Parenthood was chaos canonized. Diapers at dawn, lullabies laced with Leonard Cohen, playdates with Tommy's twins. Micah's eyes, hazel like his, green flecked like Ethan's, watched them with sage curiosity. Bedtimes wove tales. The lake boy who loved brave, the pastor who fell, the husbands who built bridges. Years layered like lake sediment. Micah at 5, gap-toothed grin, asking, Daddy Alex, why the scar? Truth tailored tender. A story of strength, kiddo. Like your heart's, big enough for all. 1 August, They returned to Boise, not for burial, but baptism. Mary's church, reformed under new shepherd, welcomed queer kin. Micah splashed font water, godparents Tommy and spouse beaming. His grandfather's Bible, margins now Alexander's essays clipped in, passed to tiny hands. Read it with questions, son. The lake gleamed eternal, kisses etched in waves. Alexander stood ankle-deep with Ethan, Micah splashing upstream, and knew, secrets don't end stories. They deepen them, kisses stolen, confessions carved, loves labored into light. In America's vast, veined heart, where rainbows arch over red dirt and evergreens, they thrived. Not perfect, arguments over dishes, doubts in dark but human. Deeply, defiantly so. Decades' turn brought Micah to adolescence. A wiry 13 with Ethan's loping gait and Alexander's penchant for poetry slams. Stages conquered in Seattle's underbelly cafes. Verses spitting fire at faith's hypocrisies. You're my prophet, punk, Alexander teased over breakfast burritos, but pride swelled fierce. The boy who'd nursed basement ghosts now raised a son dismantling altars. The cabin had evolved too, annexed for guests. A library loft crammed with Baldwin and Butler, solar hum steady as psalms. Summers drew kin. Tommy's family kayaking the creek. Mary's tentative visits thawing to doting grandma. Pie recipes swapped like sacraments. Ethan, gray threading temples, helmed a firm branch in Coeur d'Alene, ironic homecoming, designing inclusive spaces where once walls whispered shame. But echoes persist, seismic in subtlety. Micah's school project unearthed Hale, now paroled, gaunt specter penning prison memoirs from a halfway house in Spokane. He wants to meet, the email read, forwarded from a victim's advocate. Apologize. In person. Alexander deleted it twice, Ethan's hand on mouse the third. Your call, but closure's a gift. For him, nod to Micah, oblivious over Fortnite. And you, the meet was neutral. A park in Sandpoint, Penn Dioril's shores lapping like uneasy truce. Hale arrived shrunken, collarless, cardigan frayed, eyes milky cataracts of contrition. Alex, he croaked, bench creaking under frailty. I don't expect grace. Just hear me, words spilled. Seminary zeal twisted to control. Hale's own abuses buried in boyhood rectories. The cycle he'd perpetuated. You were my mirror, beautiful, broken. I shattered it instead of shining. Alexander listened. Rain pattering leaves. No absolution offered. You did. But I rebuilt. With love you couldn't touch. Rising, he added soft, write your truth. Let it free the others. Hale nodded, tears carving channels. Driving home, Ethan silent till the pass. You gave him what family couldn't, space to repent. Alexander squeezed his thigh. Learned from the best. Micah's questions bloomed sophomore year. Crushes on a debate team boy. Church youth group sneers. Am I like you? He asked one eve. Bonfire crackling doubts. Alexander pulled him close. Ethan's nod cueing tandem tale. Lake kisses, basement belts, trials transcended. You're you, kid. Gay, straight, whatever, love's the constant. Micah exhaled, fireflies winking approval. Tragedy struck oblique that winter. Tommy, en route to the cabin, hydroplaned on black ice, truck crumpling like foil, life snuffed in medevac sirens. Funeral in Spokane drew hundreds. Survivors' net woven wide. Eulogies fierce as his laugh. Alexander spoke last. Tommy taught me first love's not loss, but launch. He launched us all. Grief carved communal. Micah etching memorials in woodshop. Ethan's designs for a foundation in Tommy's name. Grants for queer rural youth. Cabins as sanctuaries. Mary's check funded the first. Her hug at ribbon cutting. Fierce. Your father's watching. Smiling. Empty nest loomed gentle. Micah off to UW. Poli-sci major. Dorm pranks emailed nightly. Alexander and Ethan reclaimed rhythms. Hikes in Olympics. Ethan's hand calloused from drafting. Alexander's from keys. Anniversaries marked milestones. 20 years. A vow renewal at the chapel. Now with Micah officiating. Stole glinting ironic. But humanity humbles. Ethan's diagnosis dropped casual at dinner. Pancreatic. Stage 3. Caught early-ish. Consults blurred to chemo suites. Alexander's world narrowing to monitor's beeps. Ethan's grip iron through nausea. We fight, Ethan rasped. For dripping valor. Micah flying home weekends. Mary's pies stacked freezer for after. Alexander nodded. But nights alone. Whiskey wept silent. Not fair. Not now. Remission flickered false dawn. Then faltered. Hospice came homebound. Their bungalow a bivouac. Micah's readings from Baldwin. Mary's hymns hummed low. Friends rotating vigils. Ethan's last lucidity. Porch swing creaking. Love you, plot twist king. Tell Micah, build bridges, not walls. Alexander choked promise. Kiss ceiling. Dawn after. Ethan slipped quiet. Hand lax in his. Lake visible from window. Blue promise unbroken. Grief's geometry defies. Angles acute. Voids infinite. Funeral by the sound. Ethan's designs projected on sails. Structures soaring. Lives sheltered. Micah eulogized. Dad Ethan architected us strong. Open. Home. Alexander scattered ashes there. Puget's tide claiming. Then drove to Idaho alone, cabin calling communion. Mary's waiting. Pie warm. He was good for you. Best. Voice cracks. They sit lake edge. Words weaving mend. Years unspool solo but not solitary. Alexander writes fuller now. Memoir Lake Ghosts. Bestseller bomb for survivors. Micah marries in the chapel. Husband a poet with Tommy's grin. Grandkids toddle. Hazel eyes curious. Papa's scar story? They beg. And he tells. Tender. One eve. Twilight gilding furs. Alexander traces Ethan's ring. Still worn. Talisman. Phone buzzes. Unknown Boise. Mr. Hail past. Left this for you. Package arrives. Manuscript. Confessions unearthed. Inscribed. To the boy who forgave by living. Thank you. He burns it by the creek. Flames philosophical. Ashes to water cycles closed. Sun dips. Stars pricking. Alexander toasts absent loves. Fortunes restored. Laughter echoes. Ghosts. Not haunts. In America's bruised. Beautiful breast. He endures. Romantic. Raw. Redeemed.